Hi, this is Dan Bullard, retired electronics engineer on the front deck of my houseboat again. It's December 6th, I think, drip. It's raining, but I think I have it all squared away. I got my heater going. I want to talk about another video that I found. Like I said, I'm constantly searching the web for stuff on harmonics, because one day I might find out somebody discovered this stuff, but I don't think so. And so I found this one by a guy named FilmmakerIQ. I don't know what his real name is, but I did try to do some feedback with him and talk to him. He got pretty upset right away. First of all, his thumbnail, I love it. His thumbnail is so bad. You know I hate people that do fake sine waves. I mean, it's not hard to make a sine wave. I showed you how to do it a couple of ways. And to do it in frequency domain, you want points in my book, do it in frequency domain. He must have drawn this thing. It's terrible. I like the cute little smiley face thing, but it's a terrible thing. Now, his video is about, was Nyquist wrong? That's ridiculous. Ridiculous. Nyquist was not wrong. I did make a video for you on how you could get around Nyquist. Larry Getman came up with that idea. He came up with that technique that gets around Nyquist totally. It's brilliant, but he couldn't make it work on the Vista, on the Credence Vista. So I got it to work on the Nexus Lightning, and I got an article, front page of Test and Measurement World, and they really liked that article. Now, Nyquist is right, mostly. Some of the comments on this guy's article are just ridiculous, and I'm not going to go through it. I'm not going to hassle him. I'm not going to go through it all, and I'm not going to go back to his video because it's just terrible. But he tries to make the claim that he can hear a 30 kilohertz tone harmonic from a square wave. I made a video way back when, and I'll explain how I made a mistake in that video. It's really cool. And so I created a sine wave, and then I distorted it a couple of different ways, and I kept going and going and going, and eventually I got a square wave out of it. And if you compare the sound of a sine wave like this to the sound of a square wave like this, you'll notice that the square wave is noisier. You can hear it louder. Why is that? Why is that? Well, I'll admit you can hear the harmonics, but I will tell you he did not hear 30 kilohertz harmonics. And he did it later with a 7 kilohertz fundamental, and that would be a 21 kilohertz because it's a square wave. The first, what he called the first harmonic, which was not the first harmonic. First harmonic is the fundamental. It's harmonic number 1, and it's an odd harmonic. But the first non-fundamental harmonic is the third harmonic. That would be 21 kilohertz. You cannot hear 21 kilohertz. He got real upset when I mentioned that. It's not the first harmonic. The first harmonic is the fundamental. You got to be straight with your terminology, I don't care who the hell he is. He can't make up his own terminology. Okay, he's not hearing the harmonics. He's hearing the extra amplitude from the fundamental. As I mentioned in my previous video, if you distort a sine wave and make a square wave or whatever, triangle wave, whatever, you can get more volume out of the fundamental than you would normally have with just a sine wave. The fundamental does not stay at 0 dB, and here's where I made that mistake in that video. I set 0 dB to be the peak of the fundamental. That's not legitimate. That's not legitimate, because the fundamental will change in amplitude depending on your distortion. And so, as I mentioned before, if you distort the area and make it squeeze it in, you can reduce the amplitude of the fundamental, and if you bump it out, you can increase the amplitude of the fundamental. And that's what you're doing with a square wave. You're increasing the amplitude of the fundamental. And that's what he's doing with a 7 kilohertz square wave or a 10 kilohertz square wave. He's inadvertently, he doesn't realize it, he's increasing the amplitude of the fundamental. And so it sounds louder. And he might think he can hear 30 kilohertz, but he can't. A human cannot hear 30 kilohertz. So he's mistaken. And then he says, oh, well, you know, you need to sample at 96 kilohertz instead of 44.1 kilohertz or 48 kilohertz. 96 kilohertz, that's nuts. The filters, that's the big concern when you're filtering analog waveforms and digitizing them. How sharp is a filter? The filter's got to cut off pretty quick. Now, believe me, I worked in developing filters, and it's easy to develop filters in digital. So you use DSP to develop the filters, and when you do that, you can make them very, very straight up and down. So having a 44.1 kilohertz sample rate to reject everything above 20 kilohertz is no big deal. It's really easy. I mean, I could do it. I could do it with one hand tied behind my back. So it's really, really simple. If you want to do it with an analog filter, yeah, go ahead. Good luck with that. But, you know, it's not that hard. But doing it with a digital filter, piece of cake. Easy to do. And you can do that with a DSP engine of any kind. So it's really cool. So this guy, he's out of his mind. And I was trying to be nice to him. I was really trying to be nice. Because you never know when I'm going to stumble across a friend like some of my other friends, Giovanni and all those other people. I mean, I'm not going to insult them. They're great people. They're really good to me. Luigi Barbano, he does some great work. In fact, I'm a co-author on one of his books. I was just the editor, but that's okay. So, I'm not going to looking for trouble. I'm looking for people who are making mistakes, and I go on their video and I comment on it and say, hey, you messed this up, and trust me, I've messed up plenty of videos. I've had to delete videos because I made a mistake in my speaking, and that's how I do, like, multiple takes. Okay, I want to mention this other thing. It was really funny. I was going through analog devices stuff, and I think it's based on what Maxim does, but analog devices, this is how I got my job at Tektronix. When you send a waveform, a square wave, or a pulse wave, through a coaxial cable, and I've done this many, many times, you can get a reflection if you don't terminate it properly. Now, one way to do that is just to leave it open. And I actually made a tool using the Credence SDS 6000. I made a tool, an application, that would shoot a pulse down a cable, and I would take long coaxial cables, 50 ohm coaxial cables, put it, a couple hundred feet, 300 feet, 900 feet, lay them out on the floor, plug them into the tester, and then run this program, and I can measure the length of the cable. And how you do that? You shoot the pulse down the cable. Now, again, I got a job at Tektronix because I knew this. When you shoot a pulse down a cable, the cable says 50 ohms, right? Well, it's a 50 ohm driver driving a 50 ohm cable. Guess what? That's voltage divider, right? So 50 ohm driver driving a 50 ohm cable, if you're driving a 3 volt pulse, that means that the pulse goes out there and it's 1.5 volts. It's 1.5 volts until it gets to the end. And then it hits the end. And like Sammy the sperm, he goes, oh no, go back, get the blowjob. He sees the end of the cable and he goes, oh, it's not 50 ohms, it's an open. So then it shoots back the other way. So it goes back the other way at the full voltage, 3 volts. But it takes time for it to go all the way back down the cable to get back to where the driver was. Well, on ATE, on automatic test equipment, using a digital pin, the driver is also connected to a comparator. So I would watch the comparator and watch to see if the voltage ever went above 1.5 volts. And once the voltage went above 1.5 volts, I'd snag it and I'd measure the time using a time measurement, time search. I would measure the time that it took for the signal to go out from 1.5 volts and go all the way and come back at 3 volts. And so that is the round trip time. Divide by 2, that's the length of the cable. So they do this all the time on ATE. That's how they know the distance to the socket where the device is plugged in, because they can shoot TDRs, called time domain reflectometry. They would shoot a pulse at for each pin, shoot a pulse at the socket, and then they can measure the time it takes for it to bounce back. That's TDR. That's how the telephone company can tell you where to go to send the crew to fix a down telephone line or a down cable line or whatever. So they know how many miles down the cable it is because they shot a pulse down there, and when it's an open, it reflects back with full voltage of the driver. If it's a short, it reflects back 0, because if you shoot that pulse down and you get a short, then it goes, oh, it's a short, and it reflects back a 0 volt. And so if you see that pulse come back 0 volts, then that's a short. Now the guys at Analog Devices, or Maxim probably, the guys at Analog Devices or Maxim should have known that, but they didn't. And so they drew this horrible thing. Now what's wrong with this picture? It doesn't look anything like the real thing. And notice that the time is going backwards. I've said this before, if you have a picture of a waveform with time going backwards, you just invented time travel. And you got to be Rod Taylor going up to get Weena out in the future, in the very far future, or go back in the very far past. That doesn't happen. You cannot go into the past. That's what these guys are showing with these kinds of drawings. You cannot go into the past. So, I mean, what's wrong with actually doing it? I've done it. I've done it for years. When you do a shmoo plot on a digital tester, you can shmoo this stuff and it shows up as a picture. And so you can see the actual waveform. So anybody who hand draws these waveforms is just stupid. And, that was a rule for me for my whole career. I don't draw things that the tester can give me. And way back when I was at GenRed, they had a color printer and a color display for displaying this kind of stuff. So that was back in the 1980s. Okay, it's 40 years later. Come on, people, get fucking with it. One more thing. It's that time of year. Christmas ships is coming this weekend, and we have done Christmas ships in this boat one time. Well, we went out and we got a place to stay there, and we did it, I think, 3 nights, but we still got through the cruise on the Portland Spirit and all that stuff. But Christmas ships is coming. They come right here. They come right here. We get to see the Christmas ships every year, and same thing. We'll sit on the front deck this year and watch the Christmas ships, and I might even tape it for you. But it's really cool. It's a free show, and I've done it on 2 different boats, on the Yarracollies, which I've shown you pictures of, and the Great Ambition. We don't do Christmas ships anymore. We're too old. We know somebody who was doing it way too long, and he ended up having a heart attack on his boat during Christmas ships, and they had to send a rescue craft out there to his boat to pull him off and take him to the hospital. So I'm not taking that risk, I'm not up to it no more. And it's actually very dangerous. I mean, one time we came back in the Yarracollies from doing Christmas ships, and the wife was driving the boat, and and I jumped off to dock it, to tie it up, and the deck was icy and I slipped and fell. It was really a miracle I was able to keep hold of the rope. But it's really dangerous. I mean, they've had guys run over buoys. We call them speed bumps. You run over a buoy and get it tied up into the propeller, and these guys have to jump in the river, swim down there, and disconnect the buoy from the prop. No way, man, not in this water. It's like 30 degrees. No, thank you. So, well, it's more like 35, but anyway, so this guy, FilmmakerIQ, moron. I'm sorry. I don't mean to be an asshole about it, but you cannot say stupid things on video, okay? I say plenty of things. Maybe some of them are stupid, but I'm right about everything. I'm right about all the stuff on harmonics and electronics. And I don't know if these other people are. I think they're making stuff up. Anyway, so once again, from the river, this is Dan Bullard. See ya.